Hey there, welcome into another fireside chat here at the North American Logistics Technology Summit. I'm Andrew Cox, a senior retail analyst here at FreightWaves, and today I get to speak with a brand new participant in the FreightWaves TV ecosystem. His name is Chris Scheid. He is the co-founder at MyCarrier TMS, a SaaS provider currently focused on LTL, directly connecting shippers and carriers, especially small and mid-sized shippers, with a really clever distribution model. So I'm excited to talk to Chris today about what are the challenges that he's trying to solve at MyCarrier TMS? What can technology eventually evolve into solving? Things are growing and expanding very rapidly in his world. So I'm very excited to have him. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Andrew, thanks for having me.
So Chris, as I said, you're a first-time participant, so it is obligatory. I need you to give a little bit of background on yourself and what brought you to start MyCarrier TMS and what is MyCarrier TMS?
Absolutely. So I got into this industry shortly after college back in 2009. I worked for a tech-enabled freight brokerage that I saw rapid growth and acceleration in trying to solve shippers' needs and bringing them software solutions to be able to make it more efficient to ship. That was a great experience growing in the industry and really learning transportation from an outsider's perspective, from an academic approach, but then really getting that firsthand understanding, working with freight carriers, understanding the pain points as well as with shippers. So fortunate enough that freight brokerage went on to have a successful exit and was really looking at what were the opportunities in our industry and where was the industry going next. We saw a lot of need for software solutions to really start democratizing access to a transportation management system. Historically, you either could only go to a freight brokerage, or if you were a large corporation, you could be able to have the resources to get a very large TMS that would likely be on-site server, project implemented type approach. So what we wanted to do was break down those barriers and provide a software solution that would let shippers and carriers connect directly with no intermediary, which would then accelerate the ability to allow that digital transformation of how the industry has been historically working.
Chris, let's definitely talk about democratizing the access to TMS here in just a moment, but I do want to talk about small shippers in particular because you guys do have some big clients, but you guys are focused on small to medium-sized businesses. So let's talk about the unique challenges to their models, to having, maybe not as much freight to fill up full truckload every time. They might rely on LTL quite often. Talking about the unique challenges of securing capacity as a small shipper.
Yeah, so our smallest shippers, they have very legacy processes in place typically, where it's either very paper-based or it's going to be just centralized using multiple different carrier websites, maybe historic rating disks or other way to be able to figure out their shipping. So what we set about doing is creating a platform in which we can centralize all of that information that allows them to then be able to provide visibility to that data. So historically, when you have those paper files, your partner carrier has no visibility into what you're planning, what you're trying to ship and do. Whereas as they put that information into our application, we're being able to feed that into the carriers so they can start planning and making more effective decisions how they run their freight carrier based off the information we're providing in advance in real time.
Right. It's a much more collaborative approach between the two. Talk to me about this democratization, though, because I believe you do give this you have a freemium model where this is given out for free. There's some premium things that you can add on top. But talk to me about your distribution model and how you're democratizing the access to this TMS.
Great question. I think that's really key to what we set apart doing. We saw a need in the SMB space to have affordable software that any and every shipper, no matter how small they are, could gain access to. So we set apart building it in a way that you do not have to have a consultant or a robust team to be able to implement the application. You can rather incrementally adopt it. You simply go into our application, enter your credentials for each of your freight carriers, and then you're integrated. Instead of having a long project-based approach set up where you would be uploading historic data and doing things of that nature, instead we're using real-time APIs and then building your profile over time. So the more you ship, the more we can learn about you as a shipper and configure your profile, as opposed to having you have a month-long setup. We'd rather have them just experience the TMS for the first month and deliver upon that same experience.
And Chris, your distribution model is, I think, one, very clever, and two, it's already built upon trust, right? So talk to me a little bit about your distribution model and how you get this TMS into shippers' hands.
Yeah, so that was the other key part to being able to allow us to offer this in the freemium model to the end shipper is one, we had to break down those barriers from TMS adoption to where you could self-serve and be able to do that on the fly. But the next one is the cost of sales. Well, we saw a strategy to go about doing that because we had the historical partnerships with many of the LTL carriers that we worked on innovating with back at our previous company. So we took that approach in meeting with various LTL carriers, in which we've now partnered with 15 to be able to have them take the software out to their end shipper. So a lot of people ask us what would be in the benefit for a carrier to do that. And it really is around a couple fold. They can one solve their shippers' needs, which is great, but now we are digitizing what was previously a manual transaction to create an ROI for that carrier. It gets a lot back into that shipper of choice that you hear in the truckload space is how does that shipper be able to more efficiently interact with their carrier? And that's really what we focused on. So the freight carrier takes the software, we handle all the enablement with each of our shippers and the carriers and all the implementation, but then allow that digital connection to exist then on out. So all the information once their shipper adopts the TMS is now digital as opposed to phone calls, emails, and other ways things used to take place.
Yeah, because I think there's a bigger point here that's really important from the shipper perspective. You spoke to some of the benefits there from the carrier having a good ROI, making things more efficient, but also for shippers, you now are kind of normalizing this pathway to secure capacity, right? Every carrier is different, no matter how many trucks they have or how advanced their technology was or is. There's different pathways that they use. Talk to me about the value of kind of normalizing that pathway between shippers and carriers.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching to the shipper side, their experience, I would say, is the largest upgrade from what they were doing historically. A lot of those were based off of either be Excel sheets, paper files, or various arcane systems, where instead now it's a cloud-based TMS. So especially in the world previously of COVID and work remote, it's decentralized access to this application to where you could have customer service at home, tracking shipments, you could have warehouse in fulfilling orders, and everyone have real-time visibility. We really focused on a lot of other features that make it feel like a business would typically deal with in the consumer space. So a lot of the things that you'd expect. We know some TMSs are, a bit outdated or some things haven't maybe kept up with the time. We wanted to focus on providing that experience you're used to in your everyday software life. So for example, just closing a screen, automatically saving the quote where you left off so you can instantly re-engage and never have productivity lost. So we had a lot of focus around that for the shipper. We've seen great testimonial to how much time the shippers have been saving and what we've been able to enable them now through data to be able to track and monitor all of their business and then have another layer of reporting. The legacy way of doing things with files, there wasn't an ability to cohesively report on that data. Now, management within those small companies can go in and start doing cost analysis, can start doing audits, and provide more detailed insight into their business and understanding their freight spend as opposed to just trying to take more anecdotal statements from your traffic department.
Chris, I'm glad you brought up auditing because this is one thing that's, I think, a big point here is that you have this one true record, this decentralized record between both parties. You don't have both internal systems, probably big disparities between those oftentimes. Talk to me about that value of having one record that you can go back for auditing and for billing and everything in between.
Yeah, so I came from the part of the industry where we were loading tariffs into TMSs, where you can get into discrepancies of what is the truth about a order, whether it was supposed to be this rate or that. So what we did is we saw the advent that there was the adoption of carrier APIs and really set apart making sure it was a digital experience. That way we can break down that barrier. So if I had to load a tariff for a shipper, I would probably have to charge them $1,000 implementation fee, where now I focus on just making that connection between the carrier and the customer. The additional benefit of that, not only did I reduce the cost for the shipper to be able to access that software, but now you no longer have discrepancies. So as you get into reconciling of that invoice, the likelihood you're going to match is even higher. And the exciting part about the industry right now is you're only going to see that percent continue to go up. There was a great article that referenced just keying of bill of ladings had about 50% of billing errors came from just that step. Well, we have been focusing on e-bill of lading adoption to where now that record, exactly what that shipper inputted, has been transmitted digitally to the carrier, and no longer are you having human input into those. So a lot of the steps we've gone through, whether it be through the rating, how we pass the information, through the final invoice, is increasing that level of accuracy. So you're no longer managing as many exceptions. You're only managing the ones in which something truly out of the norm happened, whether there was incorrect specifications or something with that order. So you can really save a lot of time and focus on what matters.
Chris, in our prior call, when we were kind of building up to this conversation, you spoke to me in a way that was very pointed, and it made a lot of sense to me. But some who maybe not know the differences between LTL experience and parcel experience may not know the difference here. But you said you want to bring a parcel-like experience to the LTL market. Explain what you mean by that and what needs to happen for that to occur.
Yeah, absolutely. I think LTL is ripe right now to have a lot of innovation that advances how that process works. So obviously in truckload, you have a highly fragmented market, but in LTL, you have 25 carriers that really represent about 90% of the market. Parcel, you really have the two big players. So they've been able to really automate and provide that experience earlier on. So what our focus has been is, instead of having the legacy way in which typically a shipper might go and call a carrier, give some basic details of where they're picking up, and hopefully rough idea of what they're picking up, and then handing them a paper bill of lading. We also have seen that there's a decent dwell time with the truck driver there having to enter information into a handheld, pro those shipments with a scannable barcode, and not only on the bill of lading, but every individual handling unit. All that adds up over large organizations to a significant amount of time. What we have been focusing on is that the shipment is ready to go. Everything's dispatched digitally. So as soon as that shipper knows the order is finalized, that information complete is in the carrier system with exactly what they're picking up, what the dimensions are, so they can route plan very effectively. So it's all there. Then once the driver gets there, everything's been barcoded. It's already in their database. They scan it and go. So really trying to reduce that dwell time, avoid exceptions. And the other great benefit to the shipper is now they have not only been a shipper of choice by saving their carrier money, you've gotten rid of tracking exceptions, because now that you're using a barcode, you no longer have this marrying up of reference numbers and different things that can fall apart. It is really truly the way to have 100% pairing and matching. And that's important. A lot of parcel is in the e-commerce space, and you want your customers to have that experience. We have the same, where a lot of LTLs B2B, you do have it where it's going to your customer, or you do want that business that makes sure they have visibility. So that really brings down any kind of tracking exception that can happen through having a digital end-to-end pickup experience.
Chris, something LTL and parcel and pretty much every other mode of transportation has experienced over the last year is inflation, at least on the cost side and on price as well. So talk to me about, we've had a lot of rising LTL prices over the past year. LTL demand is very high. We have spillover effects from parcel and from truckload spilling over into the LTL space. What can shippers do to mitigate some of these rising costs and secure reliable capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we really think is key is being able to buy direct to reduce any additional fees or facilitation that goes in with that order. The problem has been historically, there hasn't been access to software that you can do that effectively. So it made a lot of sense to outsource your logistics to another provider that can otherwise aggregate and do those functions for you, because the time savings. Well, now what we're focused on is providing software that will give you the time savings back, to where now you can leverage buying directly from the carrier to reduce your freight spend and be able to have that more effective purchase rate. The other aspect we've seen in it as well is, think about the carrier. We know we're in an interesting time in which demand is outpacing supply, but you always will have another variable of how much does it cost the carrier to move your freight. Well, with software solutions, we can continue to work and focus to reduce the cost for the carrier. And every carrier is measuring that across each one of their accounts. It's what's their operating ratio. So for every shipper, as they use software solutions, we can focus on digitizing, reducing the carrier dwell time, removing the entry of a bill of lading, and many other factors that will reduce the carrier's costs, so it can provide both parties a more advantageous way monetarily to do business with less. So removing the markup and then having less friction in the actual transaction, just saving all parties money at the end of the day.
Yeah, it certainly creates it breaks down inefficiencies within between carriers and shippers. This is a tight margin industry, historically at least, and things like MyCarrier TMS and technologies that bring us more together collaboratively might dispel that idea here in the near future, making bigger and expanding margins here in this industry. Thank you, Chris, so much for your insights today. Hey, for anybody listening that wants to learn more information about MyCarrier, where should we send them?
MyCarrier.io. Access our webpage and feel free to interact with our team. We'd be glad to try to help you and adopting a TMS that's fitted for all SMB market shippers.
That's right. All right, Mr. Chris Scheid, thank you so much for your time today. MyCarrier TMS co-founder. Everyone stay tuned. We've got so much more for you here today at the North American Logistics Tech Summit. Stay tuned.